Hello everyone, welcome back to Reiki Radio. This is Yolanda, and I'm really excited for podcast number 2 because today we are talking about the title of the show, really, Reiki. So, I mentioned to you in the last episode that we will be talking about a range of topics within the realm of spirituality and metaphysical science and all of these beautiful tools that we have that can help support us on these paths of self-awakening and self-realization. But I also mentioned that I called this podcast Reiki Radio because Reiki is really the gift that helped support me at the very beginning of this journey, which has ultimately led me down a deeper path than I would have expected. And so I'm really excited to talk about what Reiki is today, because there are a lot of ideas, a lot of beliefs around what Reiki is and what it is not. So let's just get into this. And I think that this will be helpful for people who are practitioners already, but also to help inform those of you who may just be curious about what Reiki is. So before we get into the topic today, I just want to remind you all again, this is a community. And if you have questions, comments, feedback, anything that you want to share with me, any ideas for shows that you would like for me to discuss, please feel free to contact me through my website, which is yewchi.com. That's YEWCHI.com. And if you ever want to have a session for yourself, you can book through my site. I do distance sessions as well as offer online courses. So there's a lot of information there for you on the site, but there's also some freebies. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you will receive access to some free stuff. But there are also free meditations available for those of you who may want to get into meditating, but just need some guidance. So there's a lot that you can find on my website. Again, that's yewchi.com, and I look forward to getting to know some of you. So let's talk about this Reiki. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the word itself. So a lot of people want to know what Reiki is and what the word even means. And Reiki is spelled R-E-I-K-I. Now the first part of that word, the R-E-I, actually translates as spiritually guided or spirit. And ki, the K-I, ki means life force. So a lot of us are used to the term chi, which is the Chinese version of ki, and ki is Japanese. So Reiki in of itself is a technique that came from Japan. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of Reiki today, but we may talk about that on another show. But what I will say is that Reiki was founded by someone called Mikao Usui. So when you hear about Reiki, oftentimes people may talk about their Reiki lineage, and a lot of times you will see his last name associated with the type of Reiki that people practice. So it's very common to see Usui Reiki, and that's speaking to the founder. Now, what's interesting about Reiki, I want to say first off, is that it is not the first, nor is it the only form of energy healing. It is not the only, nor the first form of hands-on healing, which is what we call it today. There are many different techniques and practices that have been practiced, even by the ancients, that had to do with energetic alchemy and transformation of energy and energetic balancing. And there are many ways to do this for ourselves. But Reiki in of itself is a technique that was developed by Usui Sensei. And the interesting thing about it is people often think of Reiki as just that, just as this technique. So you may have heard that Reiki is used for energy balancing, and a lot of people use it for pain management. And because it is so effective, I mean, it's even offered now in a lot of hospice care facilities. It's offered in some hospitals. I live in San Diego, California, and one of our hospitals used to offer it in their oncology department for cancer patients. And it did so well that they now offer it throughout the hospital. So it's used in conjunction with traditional Western medicine in a lot of ways because it can be complementary. Now, the other reason that people focus on Reiki is because just for the energy balancing in of itself. So it isn't necessarily just for pain management. Some people like to have Reiki sessions to help bring them back into a space of calm, to help alleviate stress, to help them gain or regain a sense of clarity. So it's used in many ways, but Mikao Usui, the founder of Reiki, really intended for this technique to also be a way of life. So beyond what we can use Reiki for in terms of helping others, it really is a beautiful system that was designed to help us awaken to ourselves. Now, you may be wondering, well, how? So, this is what it is. We are more than just these physical beings. We are also energetic beings. And you'll often hear people say that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Well, every aspect of you is of the divine, and so every aspect of you is spiritual. That includes your energetic self. That includes your soul, your spirit. It includes your physical vessel, your body. And to be in alignment or in harmony with who and what we are, we have to come into alignment with all of these aspects of who and what we are, which, encompasses mind, body, spirit. And as we come into alignment with ourselves in totality, we start to awaken to the truth of who and what we are, which goes far beyond what we have perceived ourselves to be and goes far beyond what we may have been taught. And it goes far beyond what we may recognize as true in this physical reality. So it is very common that you'll hear people say that they are awakening or they're having their spiritual awakening. All of these terms, even you could say enlightenment, it's really about you awakening to the truth of who and what you are. And being an acknowledgement of you being the divine in form. That you are one with all that exists. You are separate from no one, no thing. And we can see this even more in the Reiki symbols, which I'll talk about in a moment. So before I get any deeper into what Reiki is, I want to share with you really quickly my journey with Reiki, because you may be wondering, well, who are you and what do you know? So I will say that I wasn't always on this path. This isn't something I was born into. I had a very traditional lifestyle, I would say, and I was always an empath, which I didn't know what that was until I started with Reiki and all of these other things. But for those of you who don't know what an empath is, it just means that you are someone who is highly sensitive to energies. And a lot of times people who are empaths or deeply empathic are so sensitive to energy that it's hard for them to be in certain environments or around certain people or even watching certain things like the news and these types of things, because they have a tendency to take on these energies as their own. And so then you start functioning from energies that are not even your own, and it can be very uncomfortable. So back before I knew what any of this was, I was the friend that, I could be going out somewhere with my friends and we get there and then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't want to be here. And my friends were like, what is wrong with you? You're crazy. Why? And I didn't have a logical explanation. I just knew that I didn't feel comfortable in that environment. And so I would leave. Or I would be introduced to someone and their energy was very uncomfortable for me. So I would just keep my distance and really wouldn't engage with that person. Now, the truth is, back then, because I didn't understand any of this, I thought it was all just off-putting. And it was very uncomfortable. And again, it was even embarrassing to some degree because I had no logical explanation for all of it. And my friends thought I was like losing my mind. But now in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I was sensing the energies of these different environments. And I was sensing the energies of people that I was around. Now, one of the things I want to point out, especially for those of you who may be very empathic, when we feel energy that doesn't necessarily feel good, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's bad. And we'll talk about good and bad energy another time, but I'll just say for now that's judgment. But you really want to start to examine what it is that you're feeling and why. And what I mean by that is, there would have been people that I met and their energy made me uncomfortable. So my first thought was, oh, this must be a bad person. When the truth is that I may have been sensing their hurt. I may have been sensing their fear. I may have been sensing so many other things going on with them, but I didn't know how to translate what I was sensing energetically. And so as I got into Reiki and started to learn this technique, I also ended up studying intuitive development because I wanted to understand how to translate what I was sensing. And it made a huge difference in my life. So anyway, I had more of a traditional lifestyle. I worked in corporate. I actually worked in finance. And the division of the bank that I was working for at that time, they were being bought out by another bank. And to keep my job, I would have had to transfer to Texas, and I didn't want to do that. And since Texas was far from where I live, I had the option of just taking my package and being laid off. So that's what I opted to do. And initially, I was really excited. It felt like freedom because I had a very stressful job. And at that time, I was, in my early 30s, and I was more stressed than probably was normal for someone so young. And so I was very excited initially. I saw it as a blessing being laid off because I thought I had the space and the freedom to do something new. Well, time went on, and then I started to realize that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I didn't necessarily want to go back into finance, and I started having terrible anxiety and panic attacks, and I was really having a hard time with trying to figure out the direction of my life. But I knew I had to do something. I mean, I had bills to pay. I had a life to maintain. So I found myself one day in the fetal position of my bedroom floor, which, I have to say back then I wasn't that much of an expressively emotional person. So it was really strange for me to be crying, like hysterical crying on my bedroom floor. And I was just at the point of feeling like I was imploding, and I was begging the universe, I was praying to God, just please give me some kind of direction, some type of sign, just anything to help me have clarity around what to do with my life, because it was becoming very important that I figure it out. And so I was there just crying, hysterical, asking for help, praying for help. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this eerie calm came over me. I guess not eerie is the right word, but this sudden shift in energy happened in my field where all of a sudden I was just calm. And I stopped crying, and I felt safe. And I didn't feel any anxiety, no stress. It's like it all just dissipated in just a second. Just all went away. And in that moment of clarity, it popped in my mind to call this woman that I had had a session with maybe almost 10 years prior to this date. And something told me to call this woman and have her do an astrology reading for me. Now, again, I had gone to this woman 10 years prior for an astrology reading, and she also did a tarot card reading. And she was referred to me by a friend back then because of, I was trying to get some clarity in a relationship I was in back then. And when I saw this woman, which was in my 20s, she told me that I was a healer and all of this stuff, and I had no idea what she was talking about, but I didn't care about any of that. What struck me was that everything she told me about me and my life was so accurate that she actually scared me. I was terrified by her accuracy. And so I didn't go see her again. And so it had been 10 years since that session. And then I found myself hysterically crying. And she was the first person that popped in mind in that moment of clarity. So I figured, well, I was begging, I was praying for clarity, for guidance. And since she was the first thing that popped in mind, I was going to trust it. So I called the woman and I booked a session. And she again started telling me about, I was a healer and I could see auras and all of this stuff that was unfamiliar to me. It made no sense, but all I wanted was clarity. And so she recommended that I start meditation, and she recommended that I get a Reiki session. Well, I had never heard of Reiki and I had never meditated. So when I left her session, I started to look these things up online. So I signed up for a meditation class because I needed to learn how to do this. And I started to research Reiki and look for a practitioner in my area. Well, as I was reading about what it was, I became very curious and I felt very drawn to actually learning this technique. So instead of actually having a session, I signed up for a class. And that's how this all began for me. So I started Reiki and meditation simultaneously, and they both helped with dissolving my anxiety. And I started to come out of that space of feeling stressed and afraid and worried about my life. And I started to move into the space of clarity. Now, it really wasn't clarity about what I wanted to do with my life. It was just this mental clarity where I started to see life differently. And I started to see myself differently. And I started to see people as a whole differently. And so something in me started to change. And I started to realize that there was much more to life itself than I understood. And there was even much more to me than I had ever realized or understood. So I went all in. I mean, it was like, here I go down the rabbit hole just because I became so curious. So I signed up for the Reiki level 1, level 2, and as time went on, I ended up studying with 6 different Reiki master teachers. Now, I will say it's not necessary to study with 6 different teachers, but the reason I did it is because, again, I was curious and I knew that there were different lineages, and I honestly just wanted to know the truth about this technique. I wanted to know as much about it as I could, and so I wanted to gain different perspectives, different points of view, and to see the differences between my teachers. So, I did have teachers with different points of view and different lineages and all of these things. But one of the things that I realized was, regardless of their points of view and regardless of their teachings, it all came back to the energy itself. And the energy itself was the light within me. And so after I went down this rabbit hole of seeking outward understanding, I finally came to a place of understanding that what I was looking for all along was me. Understanding me. Understanding the light, the life force that I am. Understanding the divine essence that we all are a part of. So I started paying attention to me. I started to go in with my practice. What I started to go deeper with really was my meditation, and I would use the other techniques that I learned in Reiki while I was in meditation. And I started to unlayer, and I started to really understand myself and get to know myself in new ways. But outside of that, I also started practicing on my friends, and they were, giving me feedback of how good they felt and how interesting it was to feel energy moving through them and the clarity that they had and how they were having, pain and physical things that were dissipating. So all the way around, whether it was working on myself or working on others, this was all so fascinating to me, especially because it was so different than the world I had come from. So what ended up happening is my friends started referring people to me for Reiki sessions. And through the sessions and practicing, I started to be guided by and being taught by life force energy itself. So I started to observe what was happening to people energetically, what I witnessed transforming in them energetically, but also comparing that to what they said they experienced during and after sessions. And so this took me even deeper into understanding how much our energy is so important. It's such an important component to who and what we are. And understanding and having this awareness of our energetic presence, our energetic field, our energy centers, how important it is into having a true awareness of who and what we are. Now, here's the thing, in life, we are generally taught about our physical bodies, our physical reality, everything outside of us. But no one really teaches us about the non-physical aspect of ourselves and the importance and the influence and the impact of our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs. And what our energy and the energy we hold, the role that it plays, not only in how we perceive our lives, but in also how we are crafting and shaping our lives. No one really explained to us or taught us how we have the ability to manage our energetic fields, that we have choice in our thoughts, our patterns, our beliefs, and that we can really change any of this at any given time, and we can manage this to feel more centered, more grounded, more aware, more awake to who and what we are. And all of this really gives us a deeper appreciation for life, but it gives us a deeper appreciation and understanding about our impact in the world around us. Not only the choices and the energy we hold and how it influences us, but how we are contributing to the collective field. How the energy you hold is shaping and influencing every environment you go into, the people that surround you. So think of it this way. Think about a time where you went into an environment and you could feel the tension in the room. Now, a lot of times we just surrender to the energy we walk into because no one told us that we are the ones that can actually create a shift to the energies that surround us. And when you practice something like Reiki and you start to become aware of energy and aware of how you can balance and manage and transform it, you start to realize you don't have to surrender or become victim to any energies. That you have the power to manage, to maintain, and to lift the energies of not just you, but the collective itself and the environments that you go into. So when I think about Reiki and what it is, to me it's so much more than this hands-on technique. I mean, it is beautiful in that way because it really can help people with pain management. And for me, it really did help with alleviating stress, and it really did help bring me into the space of clarity. But it truly is a way of life. Now, one of the keys of Reiki, which really bringing it into being a way of life, is the Reiki Gokai. Now, some of you will call this the Reiki principles. Some people call them the Reiki precepts. But these Reiki principles or precepts, or the Gokai, they really speak to the essence of Reiki. And again, it being more than a technique, it being a way to live your life. So before I get into that, I'll say this. With Reiki, if you read about it, you'll hear that there are Reiki attunements, and a lot of people wonder what the attunements are. And the way that I would personally describe it is that the attunements help with your self-awakening. Think of it as there's this light within you that may be dormant. And you have this Reiki attunement, and all of a sudden the light comes on. Now you have this awareness. You begin to see things in new ways. You begin to experience things in new ways. And this light continues to grow and expand with your interaction, with your acknowledgement, with your choice to work on this light that is you. It's you. And you have the choice to build this light, to expand this light, to radiate and embody this light that is you. Now, the key here, though, is that once you get the Reiki attunement, there's work to be done. And so a lot of people get the attunement and they, may go to a Reiki class and they had fun. It was, an experience, but then they never practice after. And they wonder what happened. Well, it's not that the attunement goes away and that light never goes off, so to speak. But your practice is what expands that light that is you. And so for any of you who are Reiki practitioners, I always recommend that you practice your practice. Not only practicing on other people, which I do think is important because you learn a lot through working on other people, but more importantly, working on yourself. Now, I can't go into too much detail about that today, but if you are a Reiki practitioner, at least a level 2 or level 3, there is a class on my website called Reiki Tools, and there are 4 modules, and in there I teach you some techniques of working with Reiki on yourself, as well as doing distance sessions and some other things just to help you enhance your practice. But that is key. After your attunement, your practice is key. So going back to what this is and it being a way of life, I want to talk to you really quickly about the Reiki Gokai, and I'll probably do a whole episode about them because I don't have time to go into detail today. But the Reiki principles, the Gokai, really point out how Reiki was meant to be a way of life. And the principles are, just for today, I am free from anger, I am free from worry, I am grateful, I do my work and live life honestly, I am kind to myself and all living things. Now, if you look up the Reiki principles online, you'll see variations of those words, but it's all pretty much the same, the overall meaning. And when you think about these principles in the Gokai, if you think about living these words, how much it will change your life. I mean, it starts with just for today, and that's about being present, presence of mind. And imagine if you consciously made an effort to be free from anger and free from worry, how much that would shift you, your energy, your life. And if you allowed yourself to stay in a space of gratitude, remembering to be thankful for all things, the impact that would have on your life. And even to be honest in your work. And it's not just your work as in like your job or your career, but think of it as your spiritual practice, the work on yourself, the work on your awakening, your spirituality, whatever that looks like. And, even though this is Reiki Radio, there are so many tools and practices and philosophies and teachings that help guide us to this self-awakening. But being in your integrity and really honoring your practice. And then the Gokai ends with being kind to yourself and all living things. Again, imagine if you really applied that to your life. How would your life change? What would your life look like? A part of your life was to be kind to yourself and all living things. So again, those Reiki principles really speak to the essence of Reiki being so much more than a technique. It really being a way of life. It being a practice of our self-awakening, a practice of our self-realization. And this is even further supported by the Reiki symbols. Now, there are Reiki symbols that we are attuned to in Reiki level 2 as well as in master level Reiki. And there are different lineages of Reiki, which, we'll talk about another time. But for today, I'm talking very specifically to the Western Reiki, which often is called Usui Reiki. So there are 3 symbols that you are attuned to in Reiki level 2. And the first symbol really is about that journey inward. And when we think about the energy and the vibration of this energy, the power of that energy, is it really, even if you look at it, it looks kind of like a labyrinth, about that journey inward. It's about you. It's about you connecting with you. Because that light, that is you, is your power. It empowers you to be in awareness and in acknowledgement of who and what you truly are. And then we have the second symbol, which often is speaking to releasing of bad habits, which can be translated as well as releasing bad thoughts. And again, think about the impact of that when we really go in and start to examine the thoughts that we hold, or the habits or the patterns that we hold that may be limiting us in some way, that may be harmful for us in some way, that may be having us in energetic imbalance. And then the third symbol of Reiki level 2 is all about us coming into our right mind. Now, it's known as the distant symbol because many people use it to do distant work. But when you think about that, when you're working on someone who isn't in the same physical space as you, how is that even possible? It's because we are not separate from each other. So that third symbol really brings us into that understanding, that awareness of non-duality, no separation, bringing us into that right mind of awareness that we are one with all that exists. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, we'll probably talk about distant sessions in more detail on another podcast, because I know a lot of people have questions around that. But basically what I want you to start considering is how these symbols really speak to your journey, your personal journey of awakening to who and what you are. And the reason I'm saying this is because in Reiki classes, a lot of times people are taught to just use these symbols outwardly, just to use them in sessions or to use them on other people. It's a very external thing. But again, this was meant to be a way of life and a practice of awakening to the truth, the inner light that is you. So Reiki in of itself, in a nutshell, I would say it is a practice of self-realization. That's really what it is. And the beauty of it is that in the process of waking up to who and what you are, you start to have this awareness of energy, the importance and the power of energy. And the beauty is that this intelligent, universal life force energy begins to teach you and guide you and to help you awaken and help you understand you. And the added bonus is that we can use this beautiful energy to help alleviate stress, worry, gain clarity, help alleviate physical pain, tension, pain management. And again, it's complementary to even, traditional Western medicine. So it's really beautiful. I mean, it's a technique and it's a way of life. Now, here's the one thing I want to leave you with. Because a lot of people, once they leave their Reiki class, they never go outside of perhaps what they learned in class. But I will tell you no matter which level of Reiki you are attuned to or studied or practiced, your learning doesn't end in class. It's just the beginning. Even if you've taken master level, it's just the beginning. These principles and techniques and information that we're given in class is very foundational. It helps to guide us on our paths, and it helps us to understand certain concepts and philosophies. But the true teaching happens after class, through your practice, through your embodiment, through your self-commitment, through your dedication, your work, through your choice to embody the Reiki principles, the Reiki Gokai, through your choice to connect with that light that is you every day, to observe the flow of energy within you, around you, the energy of others, the energies of environments. It all comes back to your practice. So any of you out there who are Reiki practitioners, I do recommend that you practice your practice. That's what I tell anyone who takes classes with me. It doesn't matter what I tell you. It doesn't matter what we share and exchange on Reiki Radio. Your practice and your implementation of what you learn is going to be your greatest teacher. And that really goes for any technique, even beyond Reiki. It doesn't matter. Your implementation of what you learn is going to be your greatest teacher. So, Reiki is a way of life. And as I mentioned in another episode, we will go over the Reiki Gokai in more depth so that you can really, really start to apply these principles to your life. And if you want to go deeper with the symbols, I really recommend doing the Reiki Tools class. Again, that's available on my website, which is yuchi.com. That's YEWCHI.com. And that is available for Reiki practitioners that are level 2 or 3. Now, if you are just still curious about the technique and even want to know more about the history, there is a free webinar available on my website where you can learn more about the history of Reiki and maybe some details that I didn't go over today. But I thought it was very important for those of you who are already in the practice to start considering what it would look like if it was more than a technique to you, that it became your way of life. So I look forward to speaking to you all again on Reiki Radio. I am very thankful to be able to share in this format. I hope that you have a beautiful, beautiful day, and remember to always journey in love.